I went to the park for the silence, for the carefully curated solitude that had become the architecture of my life. For 10 years, that park bench, the one under the oldest oak, had been my sanctuary, a place where the world could rush by on the perimeter, a blur of joggers and laughing children, while I remained perfectly, blessedly still. I built my world out of routines, stacking them one on top of the other like bricks in a wall, and that bench was the cornerstone. It was predictable. It was safe. And then he became a routine, too, a disruption I learned to anticipate. He was a storm on the horizon of my quiet landscape. 6 feet of muscle and momentum, carving a path through the park every day at precisely 4:15. He didn't jog. He consumed the track, his feet pounding the asphalt with a rhythmic violence that felt like a personal affront to my peace. I watched him from behind the cover of whatever dense philosophical text I was pretending to read. I cataloged him. The severe cut of his jaw, the dark, perpetually damp hair plastered to his forehead, the way his gray tank top would cling to the sharp lines of his back. In my mind, I constructed a whole life for him. He was arrogant. He was the kind of man who took up space without apology, whose confidence was a weapon. He probably drove a loud car and listened to terrible music and had never known a moment of self-doubt in his entire existence. He was everything I was not, a creature of pure physicality, while I felt like a ghost, a collection of anxieties and observations held together by a thin skin. Our worlds were parallel lines, drawn on the same map, but destined never to intersect. He sat. He ran. I read. He sweat. For months, this was our silent, unknowing contract. The distance between my bench and his track was a chasm, 100 feet of green grass that might as well have been a different continent. I was safe in my assumptions, comfortable in my quiet disdain, which was, if I were honest with myself, just a flimsy shield for a painful, unwanted fascination. He was a fixed point of antagonism in my carefully ordered universe, and I relied on that distance. I needed it. Then the sky broke. It wasn't a gentle summer shower. It was a biblical deluge, the kind that turns the sky a bruised, sickly yellow before unleashing a fury of wind and water. The air, thick and heavy seconds before, was suddenly ripped apart. The first drops were fat and loud, hitting the dusty path like thrown stones. I fumbled with my book, my papers, my carefully constructed afternoon dissolving into chaos. The world went from serene to violent in a heartbeat. The wind tore through the oak trees, their gentle rustling replaced by a frantic, desperate thrashing. People scattered, shrieking and laughing, their bright clothes of frantic confetti against the darkening green. My heart, a frantic trapped bird against my ribs, hammered a panicked rhythm. I was exposed, vulnerable. My only thought was shelter. Across the lawn, almost swallowed by the gloom, was the old gazebo, a forgotten, slightly derelict Victorian folly, all peeling white paint and intricate latticework. I never went near it. It felt too romantic, too much like a stage for a life I wasn't living. But now, it was a port in the storm. I clutched my book to my chest, a useless shield, and ran. The rain was a physical weight, cold and blinding, plastering my thin shirt to my skin, my hair to my skull. I stumbled up the 3 wooden steps of the gazebo, gasping, shaking the water from my eyes. And that's when I saw him. He was already there. He stood in the center of the small, octagonal space, his back to me. He was wringing out the hem of his gray tank top, and for a moment, the world narrowed to the sight of the water sluicing over the hard, knotted muscles of his forearms. He was a statue carved from tension. He hadn't heard me approach over the roar of the storm. I froze on the top step, half in, half out of the deluge. My fight-or-flight response, always dialed to 11, screamed at me. Leave. Get back in the rain. Drown if you have to. Anywhere but here. This was a violation, an intrusion into my space, even though it was he who was here first. He was occupying my shelter. No, guers. He was forcing me to share it. He must have sensed me, a shift in the air, a change in the pressure. He turned, and his eyes, not brown, as I'd always assumed from a distance, but a startling, stormy gray, widened slightly in surprise. He looked me up and down, taking in my drenched, pathetic state. My book was probably ruined. My glasses were slipping down my nose. I was a mess of dripping anxiety. I expected a smirk, a dismissive glance, the arrogance I had so carefully assigned to him. Instead, he just nodded, a short, sharp dip of his chin. Looks like we had the same idea. His voice was deeper than I'd imagined. Rougher, like gravel turning over. I couldn't form a word. I just clutched my soggy book tighter and shuffled awkwardly into the driest corner, trying to make myself as small as possible, trying to disappear. But the gazebo was tiny, a cage. No matter where I stood, he was there, a solid, breathing presence that filled the entire space. The air was thick with the scent of rain, wet earth, and him. A clean, sharp smell of sweat and soap, and something uniquely his own. It was overwhelming. The storm raged, a relentless drumming on the gazebo's tin roof. We stood in silence, two strangers marooned on a tiny island, surrounded by a sea of violent weather. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was a physical weight pressing in on me, amplifying the sound of my own ragged breathing. I stared out at the thrashing trees, focusing on a single leaf being torn from its branch, anything to avoid looking at him. But I could feel his gaze. I could feel him observing me, just as I had observed him for all those months. The roles were reversed, and I was pinned, exposed, with no book to hide behind. This was my worst nightmare. Forced proximity. No escape. Just me, my anxiety, and the very man who, for reasons I couldn't articulate, had come to represent everything I was terrified of. Connection. Physicality. The unpredictable chaos of another human being. From my corner, I risked a glance. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring out at the rain, his jaw tight, his brow furrowed. And for the first time, seeing him up close, I saw past the construct I had built. I saw the exhaustion etched around his eyes. A faint, silvery scar cut through his left eyebrow, a detail invisible from 100 feet away. His hands, resting on the railing, weren't the smooth, pampered hands of a gym enthusiast. They were the hands of a worker, calloused, scarred, with dirt etched into the knuckles that no amount of soap could completely wash away. He wasn't a sculpture of arrogance. He was just a man, a tired man. And in that moment, the carefully constructed wall of my assumptions began to crumble, brick by silent brick. Who was this person? This stranger who smelled of rain and whose hands told a story of labor I couldn't begin to read? The man I thought I knew didn't exist. He had only ever existed in my head. A violent shiver racked my body, a response to the cold and the adrenaline. It was involuntary and impossible to hide. His head snapped toward the sound. His gray eyes scanned me again, but this time with something different. Not judgment, concern. You're freezing. It wasn't a question. Before I could protest or mumble a denial, he was shrugging off the hoodie that had been tied around his waist. It was dark blue, soft-looking, and probably still warm from his body. He held out to me. Here, my mind raced. Don't take it. It's a trick. It's pity. Don't show weakness. But my body betrayed me with another violent shiver. My teeth were chattering. I reached out a trembling hand. My fingers brushed against his as I took the sweatshirt. It felt like a jolt of electricity. A sudden, shocking heat that shot up my arm and straight to my chest, where my heart stuttered and kicked. His skin was warm, slightly rough from the calluses. The contact lasted only a second, a fleeting accidental touch, but it branded me. My entire world narrowed to that single point of contact. The universe of assumptions and distance collapsed into one searing, undeniable fact. His hand touching mine. I pulled the hoodie on. It was huge on me, the sleeves hanging past my fingertips. It smelled like him. That clean, sharp scent now wrapped around me like a shield. The warmth was immediate, seeping into my cold skin, but it was nothing compared to the fire still burning where our fingers had touched. I couldn't breathe. My stomach was a hive of frantic, buzzing bees. I felt dizzy. Thanks, I mumbled, the words swallowed by the thick fabric of the collar I'd pulled up to my nose. He just nodded again, turning back to the railing. But the dynamic had shifted. He had offered comfort. I had accepted it. A transaction had occurred, a tiny bridge built across the chasm that had separated us, and I was terrified of its foundations. He shifted his weight, and a sharp hiss of pain escaped his lips. He tried to hide it, tried to turn it into a cough, but I saw it. I saw the way he favored his right leg, the subtle grimace that tightened the skin around his eyes. My own anxiety was a familiar monster, but the sight of someone else's pain, someone else's vulnerability, was a different call to action. It was a problem to be solved, an order to be restored. "Are you hurt?" The question was out of my mouth before I could stop it. My voice sounded thin, reedy. He glanced down at his ankle, then back at me, his expression guarded. "It's nothing. Just twisted it on the curb when the rain started. You should look at it," I said, a strange, unfamiliar boldness taking root. "You could make it worse." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "And what? Perform surgery here in the gazebo?" The sarcastic retort, so close to what I would have expected from the man in my imagination, should have sent me scurrying back into my shell. But it didn't, because I saw the pain he was trying to mask with bravado. Without thinking, I shrugged off my messenger bag, the one I carried everywhere. It was my survival kit for a world I found mostly hostile. I unzipped it and began to pull things out. A spare paperback, a bottle of water, a pen, and finally a small, meticulously organized first aid kit. He stared at it, then at me, a look of genuine, unadulterated shock on his face. "You're kidding me. I'm an archivist," I said, as if that explained everything. "I believe in preservation." In preparation, I knelt, the damp wood of the gazebo floor cold against my knees, and opened the kit. I pulled out an elastic bandage and a small packet of antiseptic wipes. "I don't need," he started to protest. "Sit down," I said. My voice was quiet, but it held a firmness that surprised us both. For a long moment, he just stared at me. I could see the battle in his eyes, the pride, the instinct to refuse help, to maintain that image of strength. And then, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the whole storm, he sank onto the built-in bench that lined the gazebo's edge. He stuck out his leg. His ankle was already starting to swell. I shuffled closer on my knees. The space was now impossibly small. His knee was inches from my shoulder. I could feel the heat radiating off his skin, even through his damp sweatpants. I opened an antiseptic wipe, the sharp, clean smell of alcohol cutting through the air. "This might sting," I warned, my voice barely a whisper. I gently took his foot in my hand. His skin was hot alive. I could feel the pulse in his ankle, a steady, strong rhythm under my fingertips. I cleaned a small scrape on his ankle bone, my touch as light and clinical as I could manage. But there was nothing clinical about it. I was touching him, willingly. I was holding a part of this man who had been nothing more than a figure in the distance. And the reality of it, the solid, warm, breathing reality, was short-circuiting my entire brain. I focused on the task. I wrapped his ankle with the elastic bandage, my movements practiced and efficient. I concentrated on the pressure, the angle, the neatness of the tuck at the end. I focused on anything other than the fact that my hands were on him, that I was tending to him, that this strong, imposing man was letting me. The power dynamic had been completely inverted. He was vulnerable, and I, the anxious ghost from the park bench, was the one offering aid. The ground beneath us had shifted, and I had no idea where we would land. When I finished, I sat back on my heels, but I didn't let go of his foot right away. My hand lingered for a beat too long. "There," I said, finally releasing him and getting to my feet, my knees creaking in protest. I felt suddenly self-conscious, my face hot. I started shoving my supplies back into my bag with clumsy, shaking hands. He rotated the newly wrapped ankle, testing it. "It's better. Thanks." He looked up at me, and his stormy gray eyes were clear, the guardrails down. "I'm Julian, by the way, Leo," I replied. Julian. It was a simple name, a solid name. It didn't fit the arrogant phantom I'd created at all. It fit the tired man with the calloused hands and the pained expression perfectly. The storm began to subside. The relentless drumming on the roof softened to a steady patter. A pale, watery light started to filter through the clouds, painting the wet leaves in shades of silver and gray. The gazebo, which had felt like a cage, a cell we were trapped in, now felt different. It felt intimate, a pocket of shared experience, a secret world only we knew. The air was charged, thick with unspoken things. The accidental brush of our hands, the warmth of his hoodie around my shoulders, the feeling of his pulse beneath my fingertips. We stood in the new, softer silence. It wasn't a wait anymore. It was a space waiting to be filled. "I see you here," he said, his voice low, breaking the quiet. "Every day. With your books, my stomach plummeted." He'd noticed me. Of course he'd noticed me. I wasn't a ghost after all. I was just a man on a bench, and he had seen me. "I figured you hated me," he continued, a wry, self-deprecating twist to his lips. The way I pound this track. I'm not exactly quiet. My face burned with shame. He wasn't arrogant. He was self-aware. He had seen my disapproval, or what he thought was disapproval. He had seen me, and he had got me all wrong, just as I had him. "I didn't hate you," I confessed, the words feeling thin and inadequate. I don't know what I thought." "It's okay," he said softly. He took a small step closer. The space between us shrank from feet to inches. "I get it. I probably look like a jerk." He ran a hand through his damp hair, a gesture that was surprisingly nervous. "I'm not. I try not to be. This." He gestured vaguely at the running path, now glistening in the post-storm light. "This is just how I get through the day. I turn my brain off." And there it was. A crack in the facade. A moment of pure, unvarnished vulnerability. He wasn't running out of arrogance or need to show off. He was running from something, just like I came to the park to hide. We were both seeking refuge here in our own ways. The admission hung in the air between us, a fragile, shimmering thing. It was a gift, an offering of trust. And I knew, with a certainty that was both terrifying and exhilarating, that I had to offer something in return. "I come here for the quiet," I said, my voice barely audible. "To turn my brain off, too. Or at least, to try and make it focus on one thing at a time." A small, genuine smile touched his lips. "So we're not so different, no?" I whispered. "I guess we're not." He looked at me, his gaze intense, searching. He looked at my mouth. My heart stopped. It didn't just stutter this time. It ceased to function entirely for one long, eternal second. This is it, the moment where the world tilts on its axis. He leaned in, slowly, his movements questioning, hesitant. He was giving me every opportunity to retreat, to pull back, to rebuild the wall between us. His eyes never left mine, asking a question his lips had not yet formed. And in his eyes I saw it. The same loneliness I saw in the mirror every morning. The same longing for connection that I kept buried under layers of routine and fear. I didn't pull back. I stood my ground. I held his gaze. And just before his lips met mine, I closed my eyes. The kiss was not what I would have imagined. It wasn't violent or demanding or passionate. It was soft. It was tentative. It was a question. His lips were warm and gentle against mine, a quiet exploration in the rain-washed air. It tasted of storm and salt and a deep, aching honesty. It was the most real thing I had ever felt in my entire life. I brought a hand up, my fingers trembling, and rested it on his chest. I could feel his heart hammering against his ribs, a frantic rhythm that matched my own. He wasn't a confident predator. He was just as terrified and hopeful as I was. That realization unspooled something deep inside me, a knot of fear I had carried for years. He deepened the kiss slightly, a soft sigh escaping his lips, and I responded, my fear melting into a strange, unfamiliar warmth. It was a conversation without words. "I see you. I'm here. Don't be afraid." When we finally broke apart, we just stood there, foreheads resting against each other, breathing the same air. The sun was fully out now, casting long, dramatic shadows across the wet grass. The world had returned, but it was different. It was brighter, sharper. I was different. "Leo," he breathed, my name a prayer on his lips. I couldn't speak. I could only nod, my eyes still closed, trying to memorize the feeling of his warmth, the solid presence of him in front of me. The spell was broken by the sound of voices, the cheerful chatter of a family walking their dog, their laughter echoing in the clean air. Reality intruded, harsh and loud. We sprang apart, two guilty teenagers, a chasm of 3 feet opening between us instantly. The intimacy vanished, replaced by a thick, suffocating awkwardness. I have to go, he said, his voice strained. He wouldn't look at me. He was staring at his feet, at the wrapped ankle. Okay, I said, my own voice a hollow echo. My heart, which had been soaring, was now in a free fall. This is it. The mistake. The regret. Thanks for this, he said, gesturing to his ankle, but I knew he meant more. He meant the kiss. And then he was gone. He limped down the gazebo steps and disappeared down the path without a backward glance. I was left standing alone, wearing his hoodie, the scent of him all around me, the ghost of his kiss still on my lips. The warmth in my chest was rapidly turning to ice. I woke up the next morning tangled in my sheets, the dark blue hoodie clutched to my chest like a lifeline. The first thought that surfaced in the fog of sleep was, it was a dream. A strange, vivid, rain-soaked dream. But the hoodie was real. Its scent was real. The dull ache in my lips was real. And the gaping, hollow chasm in my stomach was painfully, terrifyingly real. The morning light felt accusatory, streaming through my window blinds in harsh, judgmental stripes. I lay there, paralyzed by the brutal clarity of a new day. What had I done? I had let him in. I had kissed a stranger in a gazebo, a man whose name I had only just learned. My mind, my old, cruel friend, kicked into overdrive. It played the scene back for me, but this time, it was a horror film. I saw my own pathetic, rain-soaked form, my trembling hands, my desperate, foolish hope. I saw his retreat, his hasty departure. He regretted it. Of course, he regretted it. It was a moment of weakness, a strange intimacy born of a storm. In the clear light of day, he was mortified. He was probably laughing about it with his friends right now. The weird, quiet guy from the park. The self-recrimination was a physical poison seeping into my veins. I had broken my own rules. I had risked everything for a moment of impossible softness, and now I was going to pay the price. The solitude that had once been a comfort was now a punishment, a confirmation of my failure. I went to the park that afternoon. I had to. To break the routine would be to admit defeat, to admit that he had changed something. So I sat on my bench at my usual time with a new book I couldn't focus on. Every word was a meaningless black squiggle on the page. My eyes were fixed on the running path. 4:15 came and went. Then 4:30. 5 o'clock. He wasn't there. The absence was a shout in the quiet park. His non-presence was bigger, louder, more consuming than his presence had ever been. The track looked empty. Forlorn. I had scared him away. My one moment of bravery had destroyed the fragile, predictable ecosystem of my life. I had traded a silent, reliable antagonism for a gaping, painful void. The next day was the same, and the next. 3 days of silence. 3 days of an empty running path. 3 days of my hope shriveling and dying until it was just a bitter, black stone in my gut. The old loneliness came back, but it was different now. It was tainted. Before, it had been a neutral state, a simple fact of my existence. Now it was an absence. It was the shape of Julian, carved out of the world around me. I stopped going to the park. I couldn't bear it. The bench felt like a monument to my own stupidity. The oak tree's leaves seemed to whisper insults at me. The whole place was haunted by him, and by the ghost of the man I had been for a few short minutes in the rain. I retreated back into my fortress, my small, quiet apartment, my work at the city archive, surrounded by the dust of other people's forgotten lives. I tried to rebuild my walls, brick by painful brick, but they were flimsy now. I could still smell his scent on the hoodie I had foolishly kept. I could still feel the phantom pressure of his lips against mine. I had let the world in just for a moment, and now I couldn't get it out. It was a Tuesday, a week after the storm, a week that had felt like a year. I was in the reading room at the archive, a place of hushed reverence and the gentle rustle of turning pages. It was my domain, safe, controlled. I was reshelving a series of cartographic maps when I heard the squeak of unfamiliar shoes on the polished linoleum floor. Running shoes. My blood ran cold. I didn't have to look up. I knew. I could feel him, a magnetic pull, a shift in the atmosphere of the room. I slowly, reluctantly, turned my head. There he was, Julian, standing by the main desk, looking utterly and completely out of place amongst the shelves of decaying books. He was wearing jeans and a simple black t-shirt, not his running gear. He looked younger, more vulnerable. He was twisting the hem of his shirt in his hands, his eyes scanning the room with a nervous energy that was a stark contrast to the powerful figure I was used to seeing. Our eyes met across the cavernous, silent room. The entire world seemed to hold its breath. I saw panic in his eyes, and I knew it was a mirror of my own. He had hunted me down. He had found me in my sanctuary. He took a hesitant step toward me, then another. I was frozen, pinned to the spot, a map of 19th century sewer systems clutched in my hand. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could see the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw, the raw anxiety in his stormy gray eyes. "Hi," he said, his voice quiet, almost lost in the high-ceilinged room. "Hi," I managed to reply. I'm sorry," he blurted out, the words rushing out of him, "for disappearing. I'm an idiot. I freaked out." I stared at him. He freaked out. Not me. Him. "I don't do that," he said, gesturing vaguely between us. "I don't let people in. And what happened in the gazebo, it was a lot. It was good," he added quickly, his eyes wide and earnest. "It was really good. And that scared me more than anything my carefully constructed walls, the ones I'd spent the last week trying to rebuild, crumbled into dust. All my assumptions, all my self-flagellation, it was all wrong. He wasn't running from me. He was running from the same thing I was. The feeling itself. I was scared, too. I confessed, my voice shaking slightly. "I thought you regretted it. I thought I'd scared you off." "Never," he said, his voice full of fierce conviction. He took the final step, closing the distance between us. "Leo, I haven't stopped thinking about it. About you." He reached out, his hand hovering in the air for a moment before he gently took the map from my unresisting fingers and placed it on a nearby table. Then he took my hand, his calloused fingers wrapped around mine. This time, it wasn't an accident. It was a choice. Deliberate. Intentional. The warmth spread through me, a slow, melting wave, chasing away the ice that had been lodged in my chest all week. "I don't want to just be the guy from the park," he said, his thumb stroking the back of my hand. "And I don't want you to just be the guy on the bench. I want to know you, if you'll let me. Can I take you to dinner? Or for coffee? Anything. Just..." Not in a storm, a laugh escaped me, a real one, bubbling up from a place I thought had been sealed off forever. "I like that," I said. "Coffee would be good." "Okay," he breathed, a slow smile spreading across his face, transforming it, making him look years younger. "Okay, good." He didn't let go of my hand. He reached into his pocket with his other hand and pulled something out. It was a small, crudely carved wooden bird, its wings outstretched. The wood was smooth, polished by endless turning. "This is for you," he said, placing it in my free palm. It was warm from his pocket. "It's stupid. I make them sometimes. When my brain gets too loud." He looked down at his own hands, the ones I had misjudged so completely. "My hands aren't just for lifting things at the construction site. Sometimes they're for this." It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. A piece of him, his quiet, hidden self, a secret shared. It was a promise, more solid and real than any words could ever be. I closed my fingers around it, the smooth wood a perfect fit in my palm. "Thank you," I whispered. He finally let go of my hand, and the loss of contact was a physical ache. "So coffee?" he asked, his confidence returning slightly. "Coffee," I confirmed, a real smile, my own smile, finally reaching my face. That was 6 months ago. Now, my mornings don't start with silence. They start with the soft sound of Julian breathing beside me in the dark. They start with the smell of the coffee he insists on making, the rich, dark aroma filling my small apartment. His running shoes are a permanent fixture by my front door, right next to my worn-out loafers. His dark blue hoodie hangs on a hook, no longer a lifeline, just a piece of our shared history. We build a new routine together. Some evenings, he comes home from a construction site, tired and covered in dust, and I read to him while he soaks in the tub. Other nights, we just sit in comfortable silence, me with a book, him with a block of wood and a whittling knife, filling the quiet space with the soft scrape of his blade and the occasional rustle of my page. His small wooden birds now populate my bookshelves, a silent flock watching over us. He taught me that silence doesn't have to be a wall. It can be a space you share. Sometimes I look at him across the dinner table, his face illuminated by the warm lamplight, and I can't reconcile this man with the intimidating stranger I watch from a distance. I can't believe I ever thought of him as arrogant or simple. He is the most complex, gentle, and profoundly kind person I have ever known. His strength isn't just in his body. It's in his vulnerability, his willingness to admit fear, his quiet determination to build a life, to build a us. I went to the park seeking solitude, a predictable, ordered life where I was safe from the chaos of connection. I was so busy building walls to protect myself that I didn't realize I had built a prison. Julian wasn't a disruption in my life. He was a rescue. He, in a sudden summer storm, broke down the door and led me out into the sun. My life isn't quiet anymore. It's filled with his laughter, with the sound of his heart beating next to mine in the night, with the shared, unspoken language of a hand reached for in the dark. I didn't know I was lonely until he showed me what it felt like not to be. He was the plot twist I never saw coming, the beautiful, unexpected chapter that turned my quiet, solitary story into a love story. And I wouldn't trade it for all the silence in the world.